This was our adopting out of the box. We were asked about, it'll be a year ago this October, that we were going to get a product in called ServiceNow. And the request from our leadership was that we take the product out of the box and that we make minimal to no adjustments to it, so that with having minimal adjustments, we would be able to both save time. And then what we found as we began working on the product works more as intended because that's the way that it was architected. And so this is our journey in that. We had a background of a single practitioner to team model. We adopted our COTS out of the product process, and the process is the ServiceNow platform. Our technical review will be with Eric, and he will explain to you at a technical level the effort he took with bringing us into this new product. And we said a little bit about ourselves. So this is how it all started. When we started, we had various data sources, including Word, Excel, Visio. We used a number of things, and I would manually put them into a data visualization. And then for a data visualization, we were using Confluence and SharePoint. Before the Confluence and SharePoint, it was very manual at that point, and it was truly just an Excel spreadsheet. And it's the age-old story of it was an Excel spreadsheet on somebody's laptop or desktop somewhere, and that was brought out during meetings. And we did not have the connectivity with an enterprise system at that point, and so it made for a rough go of problem management as far as sharing the information. The gentleman who was running it at the time did a fabulous job of running the running problem management, but it was getting that data visualization and getting that automation, which is where we started with the Confluence and SharePoint. This is a visualization of what the process looked like at the time. The process was in the SharePoint site, and it had, and this was in 2021, you can see it had 32 process steps, 10 decision points, 3 process determination points, and 9 supporting documents. And I tried to pull out some of the documentation you can see in the background here and here, and they were embedded within the value stream. And part of the challenge with this was we had our end customers, and there was a certain expectation that they would be able to go in and launch this from the SharePoint and understand what they should do with problem, and read through the various documents that were embedded and help themselves with the problem. The larger problems, which we call MITIs, major IT incidences, the problem manager would come in and help, but this was our tool for our customer. And so you can tell it was a bit complicated and cumbersome for them to use. This was the leadership metric scoreboard process that we had in place at the time. This timeline was showing just what we had to do with our, and again, this was also in SharePoint. And so it was also a manual process, and each one of these little boxes was manually put in there and sized with the lettering that went on top of it. And this, along the left-hand side, you can see this is from the time that a call would come in for metrics, all of the process steps that would be needed to get the metrics in place. And that included getting the metrics from the source, understanding them from a perspective of the measurement scale, were they red, yellow, or green, and then manually putting them on this document. This was actually a PowerPoint slide on the right-hand side, and if you can see, the arrows there is not a consistency to the arrows because that was also a manual process. It was going in and using the little swerve to get the arrow to go the way that it should go for the metric being presented. So all of this would be done, and that was all of the process steps you see here. And then it would get to the leadership, and it would be either approved or not approved. And if it wasn't approved, then you would almost go back up to the top to try to reconfigure or better understand what leadership was looking for and the metric values that they had and getting those presented for them. So the first change we did with problem is we took it into work in Confluence Wiki site. And that it's not as colorful, it's kind of plain looking, but it actually streamlined our process a lot. And you can see a bit of our process map in the background. But this is where we had, again, the MyTai start date was entered. And so we had a bit of a template in there for individuals to use. And then we had the team members that were requested for the review. We had if there was a chat. We also had other information, including the date. We had the backup information, the study information that we had as we did the investigation. And then we took it down to 3 questions that we would ask, or 3 process steps that we would look at and we have kept those to this day. And when we identify a problem and we go in to understand what the root cause of that problem was, we ask 3 questions. What was the entropy is the first, right? So what broke? What broke in that system that caused the error, the unexpected error to the IT system? And then the second is, how was it discovered? And so are there opportunities for our team in that response? And then what was our response to the process too, right? And so if you think about what we had happen last week with CrowdStrike, we're using those same 3 questions to find out, because we understand what broke wasn't necessarily a break that was within our system, but how did we detect it and how did we respond to it are very much within our purview of understanding that problem. All right, so then we have the collection of the data. And we had what we called a post-incident review, and we found with the ServiceNow product that that's kind of gone out the window a little bit, but the information's still gathered, and we're finding a way to automate it within ServiceNow. But our original intake was, again, in this wiki site that you can see off to the side, and we looked at the incident name, management roles. Smart IT was our record, and so the number that was in there so that we could tie it together. What our service restoration was, and the big is the timeline and what are the tasks and the SMEs that were involved in this. Was it a critical service? And so helping to understand the scale or the scope of the problem as to whether it was a high, medium, or low. And these were all gathered within the Wiki Confluence page. So when we had corrective actions, that was something that for any of you who do any kind of problem or that type of a resolution, I would say that in some ways holding the problem investigation is in some ways the easy part. Once you get down to the nugget and you have a team that works well and is very responsive, and we're fortunate and we have that most of the time. But it's then in building the tasks. And so what we found in building our tasks is we very much have a team-oriented system where we assure that when we're having the investigation, we're making sure that the team member who's taking on the task or the group that's taking on the task agrees with the task that they're being asked to complete, that it will in effect either mitigate or prevent that problem from occurring in the future. But what we had with the wiki system is we had a macro reminder, which for us was huge from the previous system where it, again, was on an Excel spreadsheet, was very person dependent to go and find out if the task had been completed, if it was successful, if there was validation or verification of its success. In this, we have built a MyTai log, and so the log was automated in that we put labels into the wiki system to have that automation, but the management of it was still a manual process, and it took somebody to go in and look at that log and see if things had been completed and go back and see what the task was and what the resolution should have been and tracking people down. We were using our EBI portal for producing our metrics. And to be honest, in the system we were using, because that was using the Smart IT system, we really weren't using the metrics in here as much because we were using the wiki system more for holding the problem investigations. And so what occurred was our Our ABI portal gave us some counts in that how many that we had, but we were lacking the information on how many tasks we had, what were those outstanding tasks. And so there was room for improvement here. And again, managing those corrective actions, I went through that already about what we were looking for and that it was a manual process. And that, again, we had the icon, the check icon, but it still took someone to go in there and check that box. Our metrics that came out of here, we actually ended up with some nicer metrics than we had. And those were based on labeling that were done on the individual wiki pages so that we understood the type of metrics they were, and that we could give that to our leadership so that they understood how many Mai Tais we were having, what type of Mai Tais they were, and what information we could gain from them. So today we updated this now to problem management with ServiceNow. And the big one on this is that we took it from, so we showed you the first process map we had with all of the embedded rules and regulations. And I don't know if you could see there was a lot of backflow in it and a lot of understanding on where you were supposed to go. And we had streamlined that, but it was still pretty large. And this was the out of the box we inherited from ServiceNow. And you can see it's much more concise. And so that was where we started with our ServiceNow journey. ServiceNow, just a brief overview, is a SaaS platform, and it's designed to automate business processes across the enterprise by providing the infrastructure needed to develop, run, and manage applications. In addition, the platform has many pre-built business application modules that are available. Our ServiceNow product, problem management, brings automated workflow to our problem management, allowing managers to accurately document solutions, freeing up IT teams to focus on other relevant concerns. And I like the visualization here because this does bring our problem detection, categorization, prioritization, resolution, and closure into play. So we took this and mapped it over the process that we had in our wiki site. And you can see that we took it from understanding of a new problem or an incident, the assessment of that, its root cause, its fix in progress, its resolution, all the way through closure. And we mapped it straight across. And then this is the data entry process for the ServiceNow product. We added one new field in for problem coordinator because the person assigned to actually run the problem is not necessarily the person who's coordinating it. And so that was a field we requested and had implemented. That was the only technical adjustment we had to putting ServiceNow into place. And so you can see, and it looks more complicated on here than it is, but going through the lookup, things that are already auto-generated, your selected drop-downs are priority that's auto-generated. And so this up here is our process map as it is today. The top is our Mai Tai identification. So again, that major IT incident or whether, and now what we found, these are post-incident problems that come into us because they did have a major IT effect, an unintended consequence. What's happened that's nice about this, and there's a little bit more, but we've had them come in now where they've just had a problem, or maybe they did an upgrade and want our assistance in understanding the cause of why the upgrade didn't go as planned or as intended. And so we're getting people coming to us or teams coming to us that aren't causing major IT incidents for our organization, but are really just seeking to understand and make their process better. So again, so we have our incidents that are reactive, and then down here, the ones that we're getting that are proactive. And that's, to me, a huge one for us because our numbers show, and I was looking at them this morning, we have decreased the number of Mai Tais we've had by 2/3 this year over what we had the previous year, but our number of problems have increased 7 times. So that's a huge indicator that we're doing many more problems than we had in the past. And I believe it's because the system and the process now align to make it easy and make it attainable for our end users. and make the system something that they seek us out. And so again, we're now into being a pull system rather than us having to push this onto our customers. When we look at the incident to problem, we monitor task to completion. Is the task completed and closed? And that's just the very tail end of this. Our new problem service operational standard view, this is it. And so again, much simpler than what we had before. I didn't have really good graphics of our spreadsheet, but our spreadsheet, I think I counted, and some of them had up to 12 tabs. And so it was trying to navigate all those tabs. And now, again, it's an automated system, and the lookup in the system is superior to anything we've had before as far as understanding trends, understanding what is going on within our system, and even putting in something like we could put in CrowdStrike today, right? And see what it brought up, and it would bring up whether we had problems, whether we had incidents, whether we had tasks, and they would be all there viewable for our problem analysts. Our no-code customization, this is it. And so this is, and I have an example. This is my low-code, and we're looking to build this template in the system, but I used Word. I used Word and I put in what our templates look like, and it's today a matter of copy and pasting them in the system, which again, we're looking to automate this process within our system, but we've already had a huge feedback that because we've organized this information and because it's easy for not only teams to see as they're going through a problem, but easy to be able to see it later and understand what was done, why it was done. Huge feedback. And again, I think the number of people that are coming to us without having a major incident is reflective of the process. These are metrics. So we had standard out of the box metrics that came with the product. This is our problem premium, and you can see that it gives us a wealth of information on the number of problems we have, how long they've been open, their criticality down here. And we also have the analytics package with ServiceNow. And so we're able now, and we're getting better and better with it every day. Like I said, we've had it in place almost a year, about refining the metrics to measure what is important to us. And that is huge. And also being able to build graphs and charts for our leadership that are meaningful to them. Because where this graph may be meaningful to me, it's building the graph that's meaningful to my leadership, to the CIO's office. That is where we're seeing huge impacts for us. This is just some of the dashboards we have today. The one on the lower right is our Power BI. This co-created value for Sandia is our request completed per day, so that we can demonstrate for our business how we're creating value as a team in those completion of tasks. And then this is what the CIO dashboard is today. You can see we have our daily critical incidents, total incident flow with projected, right? So that we can understand that as well. Average by the hour of our availability, successful changes, as well as our active problems. And I'm happy to say our problems we're managing them well. And then these are our critical or urgent that we have that have impacted us. And it used to be that most of those would have, if they hit a certain level of criticality, would have been mai tais. And today we're finding that they're not. We're getting the critical incidents in there, and we're getting them resolved in a timely fashion, so that again, we've limited our number of mai tais, or we've reduced it. It wasn't limited, but it was reduced because of the work we've done in helping people with the problem process. And these are our future metric plans. So our future metric plans, we still, we have dashboards that are drilled down or up. We would like to have that capability. We have the understanding that we have dashboards you can see on the left that we can certify. So if you see a certified dashboard, you know that it's something that was certified by leadership and by our system and is a trusted dashboard. Because as I said, anyone can go in there and make one. But now if you open it, you know that it's been certified. and we have an increase in the overall number of dashboards visualizations that we have. And I can tell you that just, I think it was about a month ago, we had a Washington DC upgrade that opened up a lot more capabilities. And so today in my morning meeting, one of my favorite things to do is I put up all the dashboards we have and ask somebody to pick a dashboard, and we look and see what other people are looking at out there and what is important for them. And now I'm going to turn it over to Eric Pena. Eric.
Yes, thank you, Paula. You guys can hear me, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, so when Paula came to me with her problem, um, part of the challenge is to set some context here. The organization we work for is a very high security organization. And up to that point, pretty much everything they did was on-prem, hosting their own databases, hosting their own servers. There's very little that actually was being used, from a cloud provider. So part of the challenge here is, as an organization, learning how to have a bit of a culture change and work inside of what's probably better described as a hybrid environment now. So we were, part of our learning process, it was centered around how do we reconfigure our business processes? How do we determine which ones will get moved over into the new like ServiceNow platform? How many will stay on-prem? How will we move data? Which data will be moved back and forth between the two environments? Who will get access to the data? So there were a lot of questions along those regards that we had to kind of figure out for ourselves, as going forward, wanting to look at, I guess, implementing more cloud-based processes and platforms like ServiceNow and a couple of our platforms that we were looking at. So that's kind of what I'll talk about today. So, Paula, if you can go to the next slide. Okay, so this particular project, the dashboard that Paula has showed you, it's a dashboard that's reviewed each morning as a high-level dashboard. So it's the first one we see first morning of the day. There are various systems that it pulls data from. Those systems have separate, ways of authenticating, authorizing databases, wiki pages, all these things, that were on the dashboard weren't necessarily public, quote unquote, public inside the company, if that's understandable. But so it very much requires Paula, as a coordinator of that particular dashboard, to have all the authorizations and authentications for the data sources. So that was part of the challenge in collecting all that data. Then it became a game of taking that data, which oftentimes was not cleaned and prepared, is required us to do some post processing on the data to get where we want it to be on the dashboard. And traditionally, like I said, a lot of these data sources were on-prem, which was a more traditional way inside the company of gathering data. But now we are actually doing some data gathering in the cloud platforms. So this dashboard is a perfect sort of example of needing to hybridize and stay functional while doing so. Next slide. So traditionally, this legacy on-prem, we were looking at corporate databases, corporate APIs. We had SharePoint going on. We had Confluence. We had Excel workbooks, being held like in a SharePoint site for us to get access to. So these were all the, types of sources that we were looking to put into the data. And a couple of years ago, if you look at that middle portion there, we started introducing Denodo as our adopted official data virtualization tool inside the company. So we were already, if we hadn't taken this step a couple years ago, this would have been a lot harder process. But since our Denodo, the process of getting these data sources into something like Denodo was already, a couple years mature in our company, it really helped this hybrid type of, workflow gain some traction. And then and at the other end, there were analysts using data, that were now being served into Nodo for things like Tableau and Power BI. And that's what Paulo is using, Power BI, if I remember correctly, when we first started this whole project. Okay, next slide. So, like I mentioned before, part of the game we're playing is how do we get this base data, get the authorization, get the access to the data. How do we transform it in a routine, dependable way? And then where do we put that process data so that whoever needs to use that data, that clean data, can use it? Paula would be one of those end users for her report. And it's more than Paula inside the company that's using this data. So these are kind of the questions we have to ask ourselves. If you start from the base data down the bottom, who gets access to what? How are they connecting with what credentials? Sometimes it's their own personal credentials. Sometimes it's like a service account credential. And then how are these stored and passed? Because we're trying to automate this as much as possible. We're wanting to have people to be able to accomplish this stuff in as few clicks as possible. So part of that is the automation is that secure credentials storage and passing of the tools. Then on the second end, on that second level there, we look at sort of the ETL kind of layer. So when we get that data, what are we doing with it? Are we, running some scripts to summarize it? Are we matching it up with other data? And once we get it to this point that we like it, where are we persisting that data? And then, we sort of had the reverse problem. Now that we have the data stored up and ready to serve, how are we going to control how people access this data, which is, different credentials, different ways of passing. So we, the tools that we selected, had to be able to do these kinds of things. And then at the very end, the end user comes to us. I want this data for a report. That kicks off a set of questions. Where are you going to be using it? Who's going to be seeing this data? Are you going to be pulling the data in, or are we going to be pushing it to you? So those are questions, that kind of logistical questions of the data that we have to deal with now for this type of workflow. Next, Paula. So this is a high level way that we are doing it now. As I said, we were kind of launched into the hybrid sort of workflow environment, data collection environment, data visualization environment with the ServiceNow implementation at our company. So part of the problem that we have is that we still are in the process of deciding what is actually going to make the transition over into ServiceNow and what are we going to keep on site. And there are a few different things that we have to take into mind when we consider that. And part of it is where the data is, how large the data set is, how easy it would be to get into ServiceNow, access, licensing. It can get pretty complicated pretty quick. But needless to say that we are in the process of moving some of these workflows that are selected as good candidates for ServiceNow are being moved into ServiceNow. And so some of our traditional users on the right-hand side, that are used to going from a path, if they want to build a Tableau or, visualization from something that was in a, let's say a Microsoft database, that traditional path was the database into Denodo, into their Tableau. Their Tableau would connect to Denodo and get that source. If that process was now being moved to ServiceNow, we would have to not only figure out how to get into ServiceNow, but we still needed to provide that data to the end users who are still doing their Tableau and Power BI visualizations every day. So if you look here, part of the ServiceNow implementation is a setup of some on-prem workers that we have. That basically job is to shuttle back and forth in and out of ServiceNow depending on the user needs. If it's going out of ServiceNow, we move it back on-prem into a data warehouse. which then gets fed to Denodo and Tableau. So the end user saw using those biz programs didn't really see any difference in the way they do work by continuing to use, pushing all of our data through our data virtualization. So like I said, if that didn't happen a couple of years ago, like it would have made things more complicated, but luckily we had that going. And at the same time, we have users in ServiceNow wanting to pull data from on-prem, and on-prem like Oracle database, let's say, for example, that was considered, not a good candidate for moving its data into ServiceNow. Well, if they want to use ServiceNow as a tool to use some data from on-prem to build up whatever they're trying to do in ServiceNow, we do have a path. Again, utilizing Denodo, and we have those on-prem workers pulling from Denodo and pushing it into ServiceNow. So as it stands, this is how we are, in the, I don't know, 6 months or so, less than a year that we've been doing this. That is our current process, and we have had actually to, we started out with one of those on-prem workers, have gone to 2, and now we're talking about 3. So the demand for this type of setup is increasing as we go along, and we're still kind of playing it by ear as to, being careful in how we move stuff back and forth, and which stuff actually makes it to the platforms like ServiceNow and which ones don't. Because it can be a challenge. It is a challenge to move data back and forth like this. There's a cost. And there are errors. There are people supporting it. So there's a lot of considerations, and maybe one day we can draw up a decision tree for that. But for now, it's still mainly an ad hoc process, and we're being very conservative in which ones that we feel would have the most impact and can be supported. And I imagine as we get more mature with our process, some of these ones we're saying no to today can one day actually be accomplished. So that's the hope going forward. All right, Paula, next one. We have time? Yes. Okay, so I wanted to talk a little bit about this data virtualization tool. So if any of you have never heard of this concept, it's basically this tool is sitting between your data sources and your data users. And this allows you to do a few different things. One of the main benefits, especially for us, is security. You don't have to be handing out database passwords, to 100 different end users. It's more like you hook the data source up to Denodo, the tool, and then you dole out permissions and data connections from there. So there's another layer of security there between you, the end user, and the database, which is desirable for many different reasons. And Denodo works, has all of the built-in authentication, the corporate authentication into it. Roles and permissions are set up. So, if you guys are looking to a virtualization tool, there are many out there. Some questions I had, that you want to ask yourself, does it support many different credential methods? Is there secure credential storage? How many different things can it ingest? Is it just for databases, or can it take flat files? Can you run scripts to, do some sort of work before it gets ingested? Those, and then how does it get cached, I guess, is a thing, because, performance is a big issue when you're collecting these large data sets. And so having a built-in caching mechanism inside the tool is a great thing to have. It lets you group data sets into a consumable endpoint. So let's say, for example, our setup is we have 20 databases we're connecting to, and Paula wants to make a report and needs access from 3 of those 20. So we can set up a special Denodo endpoint just for her that just gets what she needs, no more, no less, and she can hit that endpoint and consume that data. And if I needed one and I need 4 different ones, the same thing can be done for me. So that's how we're leveraging the virtualization to sort of manage these information flows. And then, and you want to be able to provide different ways for your end users to connect. we have users connecting to Denodo with regular, ODBC connections. We have users utilizing API endpoints that gives them, a REST API endpoint and JSON data to work with. So that flexibility in delivering that data, makes it to where I can't even think the last time like it just wasn't able to connect to an end user to let them do what they wanted to do. And things like Tableau, I think Tableau had a built-in plugin you can use to connect to Denodo, and then Power BI, we're using a lot of REST endpoints without that direct plugin that, from Microsoft for Power BI. And then some things that will make it easier. Debugging, a very robust debugging tools is a must-have because things will not, work 100% of the time. You need to quickly find out how it is and what's wrong and how you fix it. Automatic operations, can you schedule those like for an overnight, batch job kind of a thing that, if you're working with a lot of data and you're looking to cache it daily, that scheduling is, there are some use cases where you need that, for performance reasons. Can you extend it with common scripting languages like Python or JavaScript or something like that? Does it make it easy for you to back up, these scripts that you're using to do these data operations and configurations, so that if something were to happen, you can get back up running fast as possible? And then, as I mentioned before, caching is probably, in my humble opinion, the best thing that we get from this tool is making things more performant using these large data sets. Next, Paula. Okay, and then another thing that we've sort of had to build up our capability on for this process is the ETL tools that we used. And again, it's going to be a lot of the same issues. Like I said, especially in a high security organization, a big one, out the gate is how is it authenticating? How are we letting people authenticate to this? What you don't want to do is be handing out, generating passwords and handing out passwords and keys and stuff like that if you don't have to. It'd be great if it was supported, enterprise means of authentication roles, so forth and so on. Credential storage, if it has a built-in capability for that, that's a big win. Because sometimes, our customers would like us to just, once they collect all this data and then push it somewhere. So again, we're having to store credentials and reach other people's endpoints. For some use cases. So you want to make sure that from a security standpoint that you're not just hard coding stuff in and going from there. Does it support many different kinds of data ingestion? So we are pulling from REST APIs, database connections, flat file spreadsheets, you name it. There are tools out there that are, flexible enough that you should be able to do all those things together. At the same time, even if you wanted to connect a spreadsheet data, at primary key to a database primary key, that sort of thing, like it should allow you to do that kind of stuff. So, and then does it support many different kinds of persistence of transmission? So how are we sending this out? REST APIs, again, very similar in this regard to the data virtualization issues in that regard. And again, this will look very familiar. Does it have built-in debugging and logging capabilities? As you know, I'm a programmer, and these things are important to me. How easy is the batch and group operations? Can it schedule automatic operations, extensible, and backup, configuration backup, and so forth, so on. Those are the exact same issues as for your data virtualization tools. And there is, I've treated these as two separate things, but there is a Venn diagram going on of what your ETL tool can do, what your data virtualization tool can do, and a lot of those areas in the middle, you got to kind of decide where you want to put that load. If like for example, you can very much like join a data set inside of Denodo, but the performance may not be the best. It may not be the best place to do that. So some of it is, just testing things and seeing whether it's a good place to do it or not. And usually for simple stuff, it is. It's, you know, the overhead is worth the performance of and keeping things manageable inside of Denodo, as opposed to reaching out to something else like an ETL and just creating a process for nothing. But sometimes you need to do that if it's going to be causing performance issues. So, Paul, is there another slide after this? Okay.
Running short on time too, so.
Yeah, so this
you
is,
know.
yeah, I don't think we're getting much out of this. You know, I want to talk about the data virtualization strategy. So that's mainly if you were looking for implementing a data virtualization tool. Yeah, I think we can go ahead and safely skip this. I think we've gone over most of the stuff already.
Perfect. Thank you very much, sir. And so now we have questions. Do we have questions?
You do have questions. So first and foremost is thank you, Paula. Thank you, Eric. And our first question up comes from our Kansas City section. It says, do you always use the 5 whys, or do you use other tools like is or is not in your approaches?
We use other tools. It's just we find that using the 5 whys to start it's easy, it's comfortable, and at this point, most of our teams are expected, and so it starts that conversation, and then we can pull in other tools as we need.
Thank you. So I don't see something coming in, so I'll ask you kind of, you know, you talked about where you were, what you're learning, what you're putting in place, the fact that not only is this suite of tools that you're using applicable to your operational constructs, but now it has direct impact, positive impact to your data governance management stewards, your CDO, your CISO, your cybersecurity programs, et cetera. So, you know, can you share with us kind of bigger picture, you know, what have you learned from this last set of implementations, and now where are you going next? Kind of what's next with regard to maturation for you all?
Well, I'll start, then I'll let Eric say, talk to the technical side. For the process side, so even today when we were talking about, and again, CrowdStrike happened at an inopportune and yet opportune time for this talk, right? We had the questions about why we would even have a problem, because we know it was their fault, not ours. But the encouraging part was we had more individuals coming to us who were ready for the problem. And even in the end of our MITAI, our major incident that we had, and which lasted us a couple days, was the expectation that we would move. And again, as I said, we used to have the PIR, the post-incident review. And now, because of the tool and because of the maturity of our group with doing problem, we go straight from solving the immediate issue, right, and getting people back online into that problem investigation. And where, again, it was a pull where we would have to actually kind of strong arm people to come to the table. Now we have more groups that want to come to the table. And so we're finding that we had preferred to do it as a single meeting and have it more or less hashed out in that meeting with all of the relevant players in. And now with something as big as CrowdStrike, we have 4 meetings planned already so that we can get some individual investigation. And going back to the 5 whys question, using some different tools to gather that information to then bring it back to the larger group and make a larger overarching meeting to understand, again, those 3: entropy, detection, and response. Eric, how have you seen it be different?
If I can recap, Paula, so what
Yes.
you know, because we're kind of innovation and we're changing, we're going to tee up another question for you, kind of change related. So what I think I heard you just say is this utilizing this tool and putting in place some process enhancements and maturation is positively impacting our organization because it's bringing our stakeholders to the table. We're more readily able to answer their data questions, and we're kind of informing other operational areas at the same time, adding more value to them.
That's correct, Rhonda. And I wish I had you around as much as I have AI or the Claude to help me synthesize my words into a more streamlined.
Thank you. So I think you're going to Eric.
Yes, Eric?
Yeah, and I guess this kind of leads to what Michelle was asking too, like how was the adoption of ServiceNow? So I've been embedded with the team that's been charged with implementing ServiceNow, and you know, Paula's use of the tool. I don't know if any of you are familiar with ServiceNow, what it is, but it does a lot of stuff. It has a lot of modules. And once, you know, word got out that we were implementing ServiceNow, part of the challenge that we had was managing expectations, because everyone was very keen to use it, like their peers had been using these tools. They wanted to use these, you know, built-in workflows that ServiceNow offered. You know, Paula being one of those users. So a big part of it is, and it still is, managing expectations. Getting people what they want to do while still being able to support it, you know, because you're still very much left to your own devices to support, you know, not only your base installations, but, you know, any customizations that you do. There very much is a push and pull, a lot of negotiating for people who want customizations. So that's been another big challenge that we faced. And, you know, and again, as I mentioned before, sometimes knowing when to say to a person, you know, maybe ServiceNow is not the best place to do this. Maybe it's something else that we have on-prem. A lot of these questions we didn't really have anticipate from the get-go. You know, from the get-go, we were going to install ServiceNow and we were going to let people use it. But then things got complicated very quickly, and we had to sort of recalibrate expectations. We had to recalibrate sort of our own systems and processes of determining how we were going to use ServiceNow. And I guess I would call it, you know, how was the adoption of ServiceNow within our team? Little rocky at first, but it's fast becoming, you know, we're getting more and more users interested in using it. So it's starting to look like, you know, that we are being able to service people a lot faster than we used to be. I think, you know, our tickets for these little customizations or catalog items, things they want, workflows they want to kind of do in ServiceNow, that time's going down. And I think probably later this year, you know, into next year, like I think we'll really be full steam ahead with this. And a lot of these issues that I've kind of mentioned, you know, will sort of be gone by then. So I would say don't be scared of, if you're looking at doing it with your team, don't be scared of doing it. It's you know, if we can, you know, get half of the value that we expect to get out of it, you know, that's still a major victory. So anybody else have any questions with regards to the adoption?
Well, I think you raised some great points, Paul and Eric, with regard to really driving awareness and then engagement, and now kind of what's next. You know, you talked about really putting forth this platform. It sounds like, hey, we want to introduce innovations and we want to introduce improvements, and we want to, you know, you said, you basically share with us there was quite the demand swell we needed to work with, right? So kind of looking forward, could you share with us maybe a way of how can you prioritize the request given the value and the impact to the organizational stakeholder that's making that, right? How do you quantify or qualify that in some way to get, you know, best bang for your buck out of this solution, if you will?
So part of what we've done with that is we the team is set up, they call it an IEAS meeting that is held Monday through Thursday for 2 hours a day. That helps the prioritization. Tickets come into that group so that they can be validated, then they can also be prioritized by that group. And also with moving to this product, which we had not done in the past, we're having upgrades every 6 months. And so, as I said, we just recently had an upgrade to the Washington, D.C. Version, and we will be in December moving to the Xanadu version. So that's part of our innovation and keeping up with that tool, as well as keeping up with our customers and their needs.
So you just raised a lot there. Thank you so much. So you know, again, what I think I heard is, hey, not the solution is moving fast. The technology cycles are fast. It's adding a lot of value. Hence, we're getting a lot of enhancement or other requests. Maybe Paul and Eric, how do you approach that technology cycle quickness in support of your stakeholders from a training or a integration, or is that kind of handled by you all, and you know, and you're just more serving up the solutions for your stakeholders?
Do you want to briefly describe citizen developer, Eric?
Yeah, so there's sort of two things going on. So one, how do we get these users using the, you know, sort of the base capabilities that ServiceNow brings just straight out of the box? One, because the users, they may or may not be aware of what those are, and if they are, they may not even be aware how to use it in the right way. You know, because it does take a little bit of training to do it. So of course, you know, the first priorities that we had when we were deciding, you know, what we're going to start doing first in ServiceNow. It was the more mature processes. It was the ones that were closer to the our IT org, those sorts of business processes. And you know, with the thinking being that one, we're learning to do this ourselves. Two, we are, you know, there will be less friction developing these solutions for processes we already are personally familiar with. And three, you know, if anything goes wrong, you know, we keep we have a tight knit circle at this point in time that we can sort of manage anything. And you don't want to go unprepared out into the other organizations or department within the company and not be able to provide for them. So up to this point, you know, we've sort of kept within the bounds of the base capabilities. We are in the process of starting a citizen development program within the company. And that will allow, like, basically, you know, any engineer from any department can take the training and build a little Webflow app inside of ServiceNow, inside of a tool they have called, there's either Workflow Designer or I'm drawing a blank, but there's a tool that they can use to basically drag and drop and create a, you know, workflow app for themselves. And after which time, you know, we can take what they built and host it inside of our platform. So part of the innovation is, you know, with this groundswell of demand that we've had is how do we empower the end users to not have to wait on people like me, you know, go down the priority chain of building an app. How do we let them do that for themselves? And then on our end, how do we, you know, control that in such a way that makes it manageable? Because there are a lot of other issues that are raised when you know, non-programmers start developing their own stuff. But the low code solution, you know, seems to be what we're headed down and trying to adopt as like an official avenue for end users to start getting into ServiceNow with their own custom apps.
Well, thank you very much. So I just want to say a big round of applause to Paula Schindel and Eric Pena. Thank you so very much for our wonderful presentation tonight with regard to navigating the future of IT service management. I'm sure that there are many on the line who are really appreciate your approach to cover it from a technological, a process improvement, workforce and staff utilization, and how do we really serve the needs of our stakeholders going forward with these wonderful tools. So thank you so much for sharing your organization's journey, where you were at, where you're at now, and then really creating the future day by day through the harnessing of this wonderful technology. So for all of you on the line, this is a wrap for our ASQ Innovation Technical Community session for tonight. I'm Dr. Rhonda Farrell, speaking with you on behalf of our chair, Ms. Rebecca Mott, our secretary, Ms. Jackie Jolly, and our immediate past chair, Mr. Larry Miller. We always love to have wonderful micro volunteers or leaders in our pop line, or those we can elevate through speaking and or thought leadership in a written form. If you have interest, please don't hesitate to reach out at the links that will be enabled for you in the document that I send you in just a short bit. And we invite you to engage with us, join us, and support us. For those who are not ASQ members, you can Google My ASQ Innovation TC. That is our basically landing page where you can learn more about our officers, our advisory boards, the different initiatives that we're involved with, and again, contribute in a meaningful way for you on your innovation journey. We also have ASQE Insights on Excellence. It's really research around the globe applicable to sustainability, etc. There's many different technological and innovation research studies that have been done, and we invite you to read those and see what you can lift and shift for your organization. And then if you're not a member, we invite you to look at the benefits of ASQ and ASQE. We have four wonderful sessions coming up for you August 5th with our chair, Ms. Rebecca Mott, on innovation leadership, driving change and inspiring creativity. 8/22 with Ms. Lashira Champion King, Innovation Includes You. A special innovation deep dive with our chair on 9/12, and an upcoming Innovation Excellence Summit that will be held in Chicago in September. So again, we thank all of our attendees, members or non-members, especially a round of big applause to our speaker, Paula Schindel and Eric Pena. Again, this is ASQ Innovation Technical Community out for tonight, and we invite you back on August 5th for our next event. Good night, everybody. Have a great Friday and a great weekend, and we'll see you all soon.